if kids are dropping out of school, they're entering the workplace with no skills that get them in the door, which means they can't get jobs, which means they're going to have to do something other than work in productive labor to make a living. So they're either going to have to turn to crime, or they're going to have to go on welfare or on the dole, but they're not going to be productive contributors. And that's because they don't have the skills to get in the door in the first place.
If you do not have a good education, you will not get a good job. If you do not get a good job, you are fast-tracked into prison. For-profit prisons are beginning to project the number of prisons they will build in 20 years based on 3rd and 4th grade reading scores.
We got more people in prison than most countries on the planet, and most of those people we're talking about, black males.
African American dropouts are 8 times more likely to be in a state or federal prison than a white dropout.
The whole prison system here in the United States of America is a multi-billion-dollar business. A lot of these prisons are privatized. A lot of these towns where these prisons are, that's the whole industry. I mean, they employ everybody in the town.
The system wants you to drop out. The system wants you to be a criminal because they can make money from you in the penitentiary.
What are private prisons going to do? They're going to try to make money. You know, that's what they're all about, how much money they can make so that their stocks could go up. How they do that? They allow companies to come in and use the labor, cheap labor. Because when you're in prison, people in prison get paid like $15 every 2 weeks.
Black people were brought to America as slaves. It was cheap labor to work the cotton fields. And as a slave, you couldn't vote. You wore shackles and you got paid very little, if anything, for your labor. Now you flash forward 400 years, those cheap labor jobs are being outsourced to foreign countries. But if you're in prison, once again, you're wearing shackles or handcuffs a lot of the time. You can't vote most of the time, and you're getting paid very little, if anything, for your labor. And some people are saying it is modern-day slavery. More than 3,000 new prisons were built in the 90s, valued at over $27 billion. Another 268 prisons are scheduled for construction, valued at over $2.4 billion.
When we were incarcerated, most of us had work numbers. What I mean by work number, we were actually getting paid to do a job.
If I can warehouse you and pay you 25 cents an hour, I don't need to rehab you, because I want you to be there. That bump right there got your name on it. It's going to be there when you come back.
We have 7 New York City communities that send 80% of the people to upstate prisons and jails. That survey was done by an inmate in Sing Sing prison. And what that really says is that these communities are the poorest communities. They have they lead in negative indicators, both economic indicators, medical indicators, and educational indicators. The poorest schools are in these communities. Failing schools equals successful prisons. It is not deep.
You can't incarcerate yourself out of a drug problem. You need to have other policies that get you out of that. And I think the first thing that anyone who's concerned about the state of American society needs to look at is, why are we sending 5 times as many people to prison now as we're sending to prison 35 years ago? And the reason is we've crafted a set of policies that says you solve any sort of social problem that is at all related to violation of criminal activity, and particularly drug abuse, by sending people to prison. That clearly hasn't worked. It clearly is self-detrimental in terms of the well-being of society.
The creation of this so-called war on drugs meant that there were public policies that were instituted that led to the hyper-incarceration of black men and boys and the depletion of population of men in our communities who were there serving as brothers, uncles, mentors, fathers, sometimes pastors and other community leaders who had otherwise been stabilizers, frankly, in our community.
So when you don't have enough men to look out for the physical well-being of the community, what you begin to see again are young men who don't have the structure, developing their own gangs. So many of these young men are lost. They, deep down inside,
They are really looking for someone to help them to navigate the madness.
But the problem for me is not simply that the criminal justice system is not fair, it might be racist, sexist, etc. The problem is, how do I discipline my behavior to not wind my behind up in front of the judge in the first place?